The socks are off. It's time for the Unusable Podcast. Coming up,
what is accessibility?
How do blind people use the internet? Hello and welcome to the Unusable Podcast, where we discuss the importance of user experience in technology and the world around us, and talk about great design that just works, or moan about it when it doesn't.
Hurrah!
Huzzah! Hi David.
Hi, your socks on?
Socks are off, and we are ready to podcast.
Oh, brilliant. Let's introduce ourselves.
Yes, I am Andrew Waite, and I am a product owner of a SaaS product.
Okay, I'm David Ball. I'm a front-end web and app developer.
Whew, formalities out the way.
Yeah.
Now let's get down to business.
Go on then. Okay, today we're going to talk about accessibility, which is a huge subject. So, Andy, what does accessibility mean to you?
So, I think accessibility means making things accessible to everyone. I can't use the word in the definition, can I?
Well, but this is what I think. So there's two ways to think about accessibility. When you talk about accessibility, you're usually talking about disabled people and their ability to use technology or use things. So technology like websites, apps, devices, anything like that. Or we think about accessibility as making sure that everyone has the rights to access all of those things as well. Does that make any sense? So on one hand, you're thinking about everyone, and on the other hand, you're thinking about specifically developing for people with disabilities to be able to benefit their lives and make them able to do the things that they need to be able to do.
Well, to me, what you're talking about there is the difference between adapting your product or software so that it works for a user group that you kind of didn't really design for. So that's a bit like adding the disabled ramp outside the building that was built 100 years ago with a step.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the adaptation that allows people in a wheelchair to access the building that wasn't ever really designed for it. But there's also the kind of inclusive design where you just design a space from the outset to be as flexible as possible and accommodating as possible without any specific user group in mind.
That's a good one.
I think for me, accessibility as a subject is making sure that everyone, regardless of difference in their ability to the abilities that they may have, to still access the product or the software or the app or whatever it is, the website, whatever it is that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, but I think the important part in accessibility is it acknowledges that variance in ability. What we're saying is that not everyone is equal in their abilities.
Yeah, not everyone's got hands. Not everyone's got legs.
Not everyone's got shoes and socks on.
Not everyone can see. Not everyone can smell, which is sometimes that's a good thing. So I get disappointed when I see technology or a device or a machine that's difficult to use because it's like missing an opportunity to be useful, right? But it has some barrier that means it's difficult or frustrating. But imagine if you're somebody who's disabled, using that technology or device or whatever might be even more difficult. And so...
Or it might be difficult in ways that able-bodied people don't appreciate.
Yeah, okay. So let's think of an example. So we've just been to Subway to get a sandwich, right? And we saw the drinks dispenser machine.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's got a touch screen panel with a big button that says press here to pour.
Yeah, so it's like a tablet floating in the air, isn't it, with the different drinks options on there.
Yeah.
And we can choose with a touch press from the drink, and then the screen changes then into a mode where it can pour the drink and you have to press and hold on the screen to pour it.
Okay, now I hate that already because it's touchscreen and I like to be able to have a little clicky button. I find that's a bit frustrating that it's a touchscreen, but that's just my own frustration. If you were a blind person or somebody who's partially sighted trying to use that and you're pressing a screen that you don't know if you can't feel that the button is being pressed and you can't feel when you've taken your finger off it.
Of course. It's also too high off the ground for someone in a wheelchair.
Okay, so that's the other thing. It's quite high, but what they've done is they've kind of given you an alternative way of using that machine. So there's buttons down the bottom.
Yeah, like left and right buttons, so you can but physical buttons.
These are physical buttons. Yeah.
Now they're quite small and hidden.
Yeah, so they're a lot lower down. So therefore, people in a wheelchair who can't reach the tablet up above. And so somebody has thought at least about people in a wheelchair, and they've designed a special interface for them. But that's what you're talking about. But what that means is there's a separate interface for some people as an afterthought.
Yes.
And so it's like they've designed this amazing touchscreen and then they've gone, it doesn't work for people in a wheelchair because they won't be able to reach it. So let's create this extra other functionality as well. And they could have avoided all that in the first place by creating something that works for everyone in a more inclusive way.
I kind of understand from a business point of view why the touchscreen has been put there. So benefits that I can think of, just to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
First of all, when they change the logos and the brands of the drinks on offer, from 7-Up to Fanta or whatever, it means that they can, with a software tweak, even remotely, that interface can be updated. They don't have to, someone doesn't have to physically come out and re-change the button. If it was a physical button that was labelled Fanta or 7-Up or whatever, someone would have to come out and change that, or it would be a physical process, or the machine would have to be changed or whatever.
Or you'd put a post-it note on it.
Someone would put a post-it note on it. The other thing is, I just think, I hate to say it, but from a marketing point of view, it looks more flashy and modern.
It looks flashy.
When it's not being used, especially.
Yeah.
It has like animations on there showing, the drinks flowing, and it kind of looks fancy.
True. Another thing, it's wipe clean, which is good. If you've got physical buttons there, you might get sort of grubby grime and dirt underneath the buttons.
Sure, that is true. But I do think that it does lose something. It's a less inclusive design, isn't it? An old drinks dispenser with the physical buttons on there. Or do you remember the ones where you don't see them much anymore, where you used to get the paper cup itself and like push it against the machine?
Oh, but that would be the button.
And then the drink would flow out. So and as soon as you move the cup away, it would stop flowing. And that's a wonderfully obvious user experience, isn't it? You don't have to do anything to activate the flowing of the drink other than put the cup in the
correct place to start with, which is actually really good.
Yeah, I think that user experience was very good. So in a way, I think we've degraded, we've gone back to something that's less functional, and that's why we've seen that afterthought adaptation.
Ooh, interesting. Does that mean accessibility is getting worse?
I don't think accessibility is getting worse so much as accessibility is often sacrificed for other business needs.
For the flashy marketing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think they'll probably look at figures which say, if we introduce the new animations, then the majority of people are more likely to buy a drink. And that probably affects their profit margin more than the sort of more limited number of people.
Yeah, so like less than 1% of people who
now are prevented from buying a drink or have to ask for assistance to get a drink.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, I don't like that way of thinking, but a company like Pepsi or Coca-Cola is ultimately thinking about their profit margins and how many units they'll sell. I'm only guessing here, but I would guess that having the flash animation and the tablet fancy machine is going to sell more units than an accessible machine that's well designed.
True. When I was just finishing up university, I seem to remember at the time, so I did a course about multimedia, and a lot of that included making websites. Round about that time was when the whole web industry was starting to talk about accessibility. If you remember back, we had quite a lot of non-standard type websites. People, because it was so new, people were trying all these different things, and so we had websites made out of Flash.
My first websites were all built in Flash.
Mine too, yeah. I loved Flash.
My intro to the web, that's what got me interested in this industry.
Yeah, you could do a lot of really interesting, cool animation type things that were also interactive. And it was cool what you could do, but if you think about it, you could make websites that were completely unusable and complicated and very difficult to use for certain people. So imagine if you had a shop website, right, and somebody is coming to that website and all they want to do is know when your opening hours are open. They've got to navigate whatever you've decided the navigation to be, and that could be anything. Kind of right now, a lot of websites look kind of the same, don't they? We've kind of standardized on this is what a website should look like, and this is what a navigation should look like. I know we do have the freedom to sort of make them whatever we want, but we kind of build to the standards that people expect now. Whereas when we all started building websites, we weren't necessarily thinking about that. We were just thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if we make somebody who wants to go to this page, they have to drag this circle into a box first, and then they can get to the page.
It's just a bit of sort of like technical showing off, isn't it?
It's just showing off, yeah. So when I finished university, everyone was talking about that. This is like, it became like the web 2.0 era, where we were getting rid of Flash and all the horribleness of websites, and we were really sort of standardizing. We're thinking about web standards and making websites that were accessible for everyone. And that had loads of benefits, because if you made a website that adhered to web standards, it worked well in other browsers as well, because there's not just one browser. Obviously, there's Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox that render things slightly differently, but if you were to build things in a standard way, you know it's going to work fine across them all.
You have used IE, by the way, haven't you? You have seen IE. I don't think IE knows what standards are.
Well, But they do these days, and actually it's okay.
I'm only kidding.
You kind of don't really have to think about that. As long as you build in a standard way, you don't have to worry about Internet Explorer that much anymore. It's only if you're trying to use new features where it becomes a problem, where they might have implemented those slightly differently. And also on phones and tablets, if you build a website in a standard way, they're going to work okay on phones and tablets, sort of. Some more effort is required. But it seemed like because we were going through this, we were thinking about making sure that people could access websites in different ways. It seemed like the world was moving forward and everyone was thinking about disabled people. And I want that to continue. But what makes me disappointed sometimes is I'll see modern websites, modern apps, where they might not have thought about people with disabilities. They might not have thought about standard technologies. And it means that, once again, people with disabilities might have problems where they can't access things. And I don't want to go back to those days.
I know what you're saying. I think it comes back to the same thing we said about the drinks machine a minute ago, where sometimes the marketing, the other factors involved take over.
Maybe you're right. Maybe that's always going to be the case.
I think the key with that Web 2.0 wave that you mentioned was it wasn't just making websites more accessible. It was making them better for everyone. It was making them more search engine optimized. Everyone could access that content more easily. It was more inclusive for everyone. And I also think that in that wave, the cost to business wasn't huge in choosing to build something in a standards compliant way versus a non-compliant way. And I think the risk that we face right now is that we've got to a web that is fairly accessible and it can still be better, but the problem is that the improvements from here on in can be very expensive, especially in the sort of latest standards.
Been reading up on the web standards, have you?
Yeah, so WCAG is the latest accessibility. WCAG 2.1 is the latest accessibility standard, which defines lots of different things that websites should and shouldn't do. So things like the colour contrast, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
I definitely think that all the things in there, definitely sensible, and I would love it for every website to comply with that. But a lot of those things are very picky, pernickety things that could potentially take a lot of re-engineering of systems.
Oh, right, okay.
And
have we just got so good at making websites that we've solved most of the problems, and the problems left over are the ones that are just really difficult to do?
Yeah, I think they're the ones that are non-obvious. I think they're the ones that involve time and a great deal of expertise, and they're the ones that aren't naturally solved by the tools that we have. If you think about, for example, one of the most basic ones, which is adding alternative text onto images. So that,
okay, that's the one that people are likely to know about the most, though, isn't it?
So every time you add an image in, you put some text on there, and so if someone can't see the image, it reads it out, and it's also useful for search engines.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take a lot of effort to insert the alt text. But some of the other things involved in accessibility would require the whole restructuring of the code that makes up the page.
I know what you mean, actually. So making things work in Screenreaders isn't always as easy as you think. So I thought that building with web standards, this will definitely work in with the screen reader. So by the way, we haven't really explained what a screen reader is. So if somebody who's blind or partially sighted might use this piece of software which will read out the contents of the web page to you, and you can sort of navigate it with keyboard. But navigating with a keyboard could be quite complicated. So if you're looking at something...
But what I'm saying, to go back to my point, is the standards don't enforce that you do it in the right way. It's very easy.
It's quite vague.
It's very easy to make a website that's hard to navigate by keyboard. And so I think that those are the sorts of things that are left that still aren't necessarily always optimized and always thought about.
I suppose they're purposely vague because the web's changing so fast that if they were to say, actually, you definitely need to do this, give it a year or two, that might not be the case anymore.
I don't know. I think having a spec and making things validate to it, when alt text became part of a standard and your page would fail validation and things, it just became, everyone just included alt text all of a sudden.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that we put a lot of emphasis on the owners of a website or the maker of a website or the developer to have the responsibility for making a site accessible. And I think they do have responsibility, obviously, but it has to start with the standard. Like, that's the easiest way to get things accessible, is to put the responsibility there. If the languages and the building blocks that we use to make the web are enforcing accessibility from the ground up, then...
Well, they kind of are. If you just put a paragraph of text on a page, that's accessible by default. The web is accessible by default.
I know, but we ruin it, don't we?
We ruin it by trying to make it look like a design that someone's made.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you just put text on a page, it's immediately responsive. It works on all devices. It will be read out by the screen reader fine. It's when you start making things complicated by saying, oh, actually, this menu that is over here on the right, actually, when you press that, it'll make this menu panel appear on the left. but that will slide out from the top, and it all just becomes just this weird complicated mess because all that code has to exist somewhere on the page. And we as sighted users are looking at the page, and it makes sense for us. There's something on the left, something on the right, something at the top and the bottom. That's fine. But if you're having that read out to you by software,
there's no sense of left, right, top, bottom. It's just an order of things.
Yeah.
It's only linear. There's only backwards and forwards.
Exactly. So that's why it's complicated.
Yeah.
So the problem that I had on a website that I worked on recently is that you press a button to make the menu slide out. But what was happening is because that menu is hidden off the screen to start with, I thought, oh, that's fine. It's hidden. Obviously it's hidden. And it's hidden to us who are using our eyes. But at a screen reader, it reads it out as one of the first things on the page.
Right, okay.
Because in the source order, it was one of the first things on the page.
Okay,
it just so happens that it's actually, because it slides in, it's actually living over there somewhere to the right.
Yeah, I think that is a common problem. How the order of things is presented on a screen reader is a huge problem. So your thing that you mentioned, so going back to the fact that you said about the Web 2.0, where all of a sudden we were introducing these standards and everything seemed to be getting better very quickly.
Yeah.
I think often making things more accessible has accidental positive side effects.
Yeah.
So the accidental positive side effects of that revolution, well, maybe they were intended, but that standardization benefited everyone. Like you said, all of a sudden navigations became more predictable and consistent for people that didn't have any impairment.
Yeah.
Search engines could more easily access the content as well.
Definitely.
And I think that's often the case. If you think about, for example, I think one of the things in the WCAG guidelines is that on a touch device, everything be a certain size so that someone who's got, for example, motor problems, can't necessarily press particularly accurately.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
So to the touch targets, the actual buttons that you press, the links that you click, anything like that, are big enough that someone who has a problem with, for example, not having a steady hand can still press it, okay? So they're the standards and the guidelines, and we can conform to that. But when you think about it, that has a really positive side effect. Imagine, for example, someone who's perfectly able but is just, I don't know, on a bumpy bus, right?
Yeah.
They can still press the button more easily. If you think about, I don't know, someone who's trying to carry some shopping home and they need to press a button on their phone to just send a quick message, again...
And they're doing it one-handed.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the accessibility rules have a particular use case in mind that they're helping out, but it's not just that use case that they help out. There's plenty of other people
definitely,
helping out.
Yeah.
I think it's also important with accessibility. We often get, as we've already done in this podcast, narrowly focused on two common accessibility groups. So people, for example, in a wheelchair who obviously need, in terms of physical access to buildings, have issues, and also people who have sight problems and accessing websites. But there are a huge number of other things. For example, someone with ADHD.
Oh, what's that?
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They may struggle, for example, to concentrate on something. So they, if you've got a page of content, they're probably struggling to read it and their mind's wandering off on a million different ways.
Yes. I worked on a university website once, and it had a big banner that animated. Well, it didn't animate, it was a slideshow. So the image changed every few seconds to another image. And we were told by the client, we have to add a way to be able to pause that, because there are some people who really struggle to read all the content on the page because while this is moving, they can't read anything. So yeah, I completely get it, because if you go to a website that has adverts down the side, loads of things trying to get your attention, it is very frustrating and it is very difficult to read the text.
Yeah, even as someone who doesn't have those problems, like you said, there could be so much vying for your attention on a page, flashing buttons, adverts popping up. Just imagine someone who's got that kind of attention problems and their mind's wandering. But I think it's important to recognise that accessibility isn't just the things that you can see or the obvious ones. There's lots of other problems that people have. I don't want to say problems, but differences that people have that mean using technology can be a problem for them. And I think it's important as people that design interfaces that, we think about those cases as well.
Like what?
Well, like ADHD, like I've just mentioned.
Oh, okay.
Or, for example, dyslexia.
Yeah. Too much text. Big blocks of text. That can make a page quite unusable. If you've got way too much text, maybe the line height isn't very much, and so the text is really close together, that could be really difficult to read. And if that's important information, but if it's that difficult to read, it's useless. Also, something as simple as making sure that you don't use really high-level words. I don't want to read something that's like a big block of text that's really complicated to understand. Just keep it simple. That is absolutely the best thing to do. And like you said, that's not just a benefit for people who can't read very well. That's a benefit for us all.
Until the designers and marketers get involved and
then start adding loads of text. Right, can I tell you about our latest Twitter followers?
Of course.
Do you want to say hello to each one?
I do.
We have Patrick Mooney.
Hi, Patrick.
Neil White.
Hi, Neil.
Chakib Labidi.
Hi, Chakib.
Laura Buri.
Hi, Laura.
Robert Jarvis.
Hi, Robert.
Brian Widin.
Hi, Brian.
Firoz Shaikh.
Hi, Faraz.
Eliza Manzato.
Hi, Eliza.
Chris Paddock.
Hi, Chris.
Alison C.
Hi, Alison.
Joy Powers.
Hi, Joy.
Lucia Lagoska.
Hi, Lucia.
Martin McDermott.
Hi, Martin.
Hyber Matani.
Hi, Hyber.
Pavlin Penchev.
Hi, Pavlin.
Shanti Kanhai.
Hi, Shanti.
Craig Tyner.
Hi, Craig.
Jason Pompon.
Hi, Jason.
Tara Thomas.
Hi, Tara.
Oh.
Slick. Straight through in one go.
Straight through in one go.
Have you ever heard of the Funkify disability simulator?
Funkify? No, what's that?
So it's a Chrome plugin, and what it does is you can use it on any web page. I'll quickly show you now. And it allows you to simulate a range of disabilities. So you can experience what it's like to look at the website through blurry vision. We can look at a colour issue. So if someone's got, what's it called? Not colour blindness, but where colours are shifted.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, but like, for example, the dyslexia one. So if I press this, start here on there here, what that's going to do is it's jumbling the text on the website, so we can actually see how that looks to someone who's got, I mean, it's obviously just an approximation, but it allows you to look at your own content and see something approximating what it's like for someone with that disability.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that is, because
there's one that
makes you appreciate it.
There's one that loses control of your mouse a little bit, so wiggles the mouse around a bit.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if you've not got, for example, very good dexterity, there's quite a few of them.
That's obviously a common thing, because we're all going to get old and we're all going to kind of lose the ability to use our hands as much as we have now, and so that is an important one.
I think, again, it's not necessarily a Boolean, you either have an issue with dexterity or you don't.
Yeah.
There's a huge spectrum of people that, just like you said, it's people that are getting a little bit old and no longer have dexterity. There's nothing diagnosably medically wrong with them.
Yeah.
They're just, not as precise as they were before. But making it accessible to people who have dexterity problems is just making it easier for everyone.
Yeah. Because someone might be using a computer with a mouse and they might have a kid pulling on their arm, or they might have a dog in their lap.
Yeah.
You want to make sure it's that
making it
easy.
easier for everyone. This one, by the way, is one of my favourite ones in this Funkify simulator. It's called, they've all got names, it's called Hyperactive Henry. It basically simulates what it's like for someone with like ADHD or similar to use a website, and it just basically pops up a load of random stuff as you're trying to access the website and read it.
It shows you random animated GIFs while you're trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
This is kind of what the web was like in the 90s, with pop-ups.
It's almost like a 90s web simulator, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
wow, that's horrible.
It is unfortunately a paid-for plugin, but it has a free trial, but I think it's quite cool anyway. It's called Funkify.
It's a shame that it's not free, because I think a lot of people, like web developers and software developers, and anyone who's like an interface developer, needs to use that sort of thing to understand all of the problems, at least just to sympathise.
They do actually have a free version.
Okay.
And the premium one's $4.99 a month, but I mean,
pricey.
We're not in any way associated with them. I just thought it was a cool and interesting thing. So the company that I work for, again, this isn't a paid for plug, but I just generally think is interesting given the subject matter.
Go on then.
Has made a screen reader simulator that you can do as a Chrome plugin.
Yeah, okay.
You can install it. And what you can do is go to a website that you've built. In fact, you can go to any website, press the button in your browser to activate it.
Yeah.
And then it will act like a screen reader. You can even press a button that makes all the actual content invisible.
Oh, right. Okay. So you know exactly what it's like to be a blind person. You can't see the content at all.
Yeah. So you can choose an option. It's called curtain, which I think is quite a nice term for it, actually. So it puts like a curtain over the content.
Okay.
And then what you can do is you can navigate through the site using these controls.
Home link.
Okay.
Main menu bar.
So it'll actually read out and you can actually click through and navigate and step through it as a screen reader.
Okay.
So it's quite useful. That's called the Silktide Screen Reader Simulator, and it's on the Chrome marketplace.
The one on Mac, it's called VoiceOver, is actually really good. I've been using that quite a lot because so I make websites. I want to make sure that those websites are able to be viewed, what's the right word, accessed by blind people using a screen reader, and so I do use that quite a lot. It's quite a steep learning curve, really, because I'm not the sort of person that would use keyboard shortcuts or keyboard all that much. I usually use a mouse, but with a screen reader, you pretty much have to use keyboard commands, and it's really difficult, and it makes you appreciate how difficult it is for people using a keyboard to to navigate a website.
You can only go backwards and forwards.
Exactly, yeah.
One thing that I didn't understand until I was shown something, there are different ways to navigate through the page.
Yeah.
So no matter what you do, it's linear, and it will read one thing, then the next thing on the page, then the next thing, and then the next thing, and you can go forwards and back, okay?
Sort of, but there are complications there because you can go inside something.
Okay.
So there might be a menu because it will say, this is a menu that contains 6 items, and you could go, next, and it'll skip over that. Or you could press to go into that menu, and it'll read you out those 6 items.
The thing that I meant, though, was that you can actually choose sort of almost like the landmarks to navigate the page by.
Yeah.
So you can navigate by links, where it will go from link to link. But you can also go, for example, by headings.
Yeah.
I think there's a few other things you can do as well. So in a screen reader, you can choose how to skip through the page. And then obviously if you find the heading you're interested in, you can then delve into what's below the heading. But I think depending on what the site is and how it's been built, someone using a screen reader might adapt which of those they use to navigate.
Yeah, you have these things called landmarks. And so the landmarks completely depend on the website and how the website's been built. So me as a web developer can choose what the landmarks are. So you might have one for main content, you might have one for footer, main navigation, things like that.
So I have a question to pose.
Oh God.
And it's one that I probably doesn't have a correct answer and could be a whole topic on its own, a whole huge podcast on its own.
Let's ignore it then.
So, do we have a duty to make sure that everything is accessible to everyone?
Us as website and app developers?
Yes. Do we have a duty to make everything accessible to everyone? Or does the level of accessibility, or should I say, should the level of accessibility depend on the target audience?
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. So a client comes to us and says that they are selling these TVs. They need a new website for some TVs, right? They know that their audience are going to be sighted. So
I don't know. I think a lot of blind people have a TV and would listen to the audio. You get audio descriptions, don't you? So you can hear what's happening.
That's true, actually. Okay, that's a terrible example. But a client might say for certain that they know that their audience are not blind or disabled in any way. And so that they say, we want this as cheap as possible. Don't worry about adding all of your accessibility stuff. We don't care about blind people. They're not our target audience. That's what the client might say to us. So what you've asked there is, do we, as the website developers, still have the duty to make that website accessible for those people? And I think that we do, because everyone should have access to it. Even if a blind person is not going to buy their TV, they might be buying it for someone. Maybe that's a bad example. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a tricky one.
I think even if the client thinks they really, really know their audience, we should still have a go. I do think accessibility should be a base level. Maybe not to the degree where you're spending loads of time making sure that it's perfect in a screen reader, but making sure that it's okay for everyone.
Personally, I think it's something we should always strive for.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important to understand your audience to know how far that you have to go. See, this is where it gets tricky as well, because there is a cost associated with making something as accessible as it can be.
Only because of the time it takes, not because of anything else. It takes some time and effort to make sure that you've tested it properly for all these different conditions.
But for a business, they're paying someone to build a website that, the longer it takes in time, the more it costs.
Yeah.
I think where it does get tricky, though, is where people start to make assumptions about their audience.
One of those assumptions might be that they've got a certain screen size or a certain type of computer that can run complex animations. Or another one might be an assumption that they've got like a free data plan or something like that. So if you've made a mobile app or mobile website that downloads loads of video and it's got lots of things happening, that could actually be quite costly if someone's out and about and using like 3G or 4G. They might not want to download this big image file.
The device as well, the capability of the device. So if it's a phone and an old phone on a poor internet connection, this is actually something that we have to deal with a lot in our app, because it's used by large organisations which often buy very outdated or keep outdated equipment for their users.
Right.
So our app has to work on quite old, outdated screen sizes.
Yeah.
And in lockdown browsers, because they're only allowed to use Internet Explorer that's inbuilt and they're not allowed to install Chrome.
Oh, right, okay.
So to me, that is accessibility as well, though.
I agree with that.
It's all those situations, it's not just about someone that's got what we might consider a disability.
Mm-hmm.
It's, all of us every day as we're going about our daily lives, and the different devices interfaces we use and the things that cause us to temporarily have an issue.
Yeah, I think as long as we're creating these interfaces, we're sort of empathizing with the user and the user's situation and trying to sort of understand the user. As long as we're thinking of that, then I assume we're going to cover all of these problems and sort all of these problems out. Can I tell you about my wife's granddad? Okay, so he is in a care home.
Okay.
And he wanted to be able to listen to some music. So we thought of all the different ways that we can allow this. So he can't really get out of bed on his own. And he is perfectly sound of mind, but he can't use his hands all that well. So we wanted to give him the ability to be able to listen to music.
Okay.
And start it, stop it whenever he wanted to. Okay, so there's a few different ways that we tried to do this. First, gave him a tablet. So it was like a cheap Android tablet linked to Spotify so that he could listen to any sort of jazz. He loves jazz music. So he could listen to jazz music by sort of browsing through Spotify playlists and all that sort of thing. However, what I noticed straight away is that he was having trouble holding the tablet as well as pressing it. And what was happening with this particular tablet is it had some weird mode on it where if you pressed in two separate places, it would take a screenshot, right?
Ooh.
This is weird. And so as he's holding it, his grip's not so great, so he was kind of putting his hand on the screen. He could have been pressing something, but he wasn't. He was just sort of holding the screen down. And whenever he tried to touch with his other finger, it would take a screenshot, like I said. But the screenshot would then show on the screen.
So he'd think that was the actual interface.
So it looks like it had frozen, but actually he's just seeing a screenshot of the screen that he's just taken. It's so bad, yeah. I don't know if that was something that came pre-installed with that tablet. I can't remember what make it was, but it was quite a cheap sort of low end.
I think that's a very good illustration of why I absolutely hate manufacturers that take Android and put their own rubbish on it.
Yeah.
Because standard Android doesn't do that at all.
No, true. Even still, I think even if we got him like the most expensive tablet in the world, he probably would have struggled. So what I tried to do for him is use some voice control. Mm-hmm. So the latest Android phones, they have the Google Assistant, which is where you can talk to it and it will do something. So this was my plan. We got him a phone and a stand so that he could use his voice and play some jazz music. So all he had to say is the command that makes it work, play jazz music, or play the exact artist that he wanted. And I thought that was quite a clever way of solving the problem for him because he isn't able to use his hands very much, but he can use his voice fine.
So that's actually an example of something, you know what we were saying earlier about making something accessible has a side effect that it makes it better for everyone else. I think that's almost like the opposite way round. So voice control has been invented as almost like the next level of user interface that's better for everyone, but in the process has created something that for a smaller group of people that aren't sufficient on their own to drive that kind of innovation, but it's made the world better for them as a side effect. That's the other way around. You know, it's an innovation in technology for the mainstream that has had this great side effect of being more inclusive for certain groups of people.
Absolutely ideal, yeah. And it means that as well, if you were, say, bedbound or weren't able to get up very easily, you could use your voice to turn on the TV, to change the channel. Because I do that all the time. I'll speak to my Google Home and ask it to play something on Netflix without even having to get up or pick up the remote or even pick up my phone or anything like that.
One of the best things that I have ever done in my home is, so we've had a Google Home for quite a while, and then we got a second one and I put it upstairs, so we've got downstairs and upstairs, and then I bought one and put it in the bathroom.
Right. Okay.
So when I am temporarily disabled...
What, sat down on the loo?
Well, yeah... I
suppose you're not able to do anything else right then.
Yeah, it's not particularly hygienic to be using a screen or something, is it? As you are. Yeah, so I can talk and ask it what for example, in the morning when I get up, I'll go to the bathroom and do my morning routine. And I'll use a nice image for everyone listening. But I'll ask it, you know, what's on my calendar or how's my commute to work? And then I'll get in the shower. And again, I've got wet hands, so I am temporarily unable to use a normal user interface because I'd get my phone wet. Okay, I mean, to be fair, actually, most phones are waterproof now, aren't they? But
I don't know, don't take it in the shower with you.
Yeah, but still, like, it would still be impossible to use because the touchscreen wouldn't, as soon as you get water on it, they're useless, aren't they? But I can, you know, ask it to play Whitney Houston, so I can sing along to
Whitney in the shower.
And if it plays a track I don't like, I can skip it without having to. Honestly, the Google Home Mini is just the right size as well. Puts out just enough sound in a bathroom. The best use for a Google Home ever.
In your bathroom, listening to Whitney Houston. I'm happy a poo.
Is that a B-side? Is that one of a B?
Is that Whitney Houston?
I don't think she ever sung about having a poo.
Another good thing you could control with your voice. So say that you're disabled, you're not able to move around the house, but you're getting cold in your house. You can use it to connect to a thermostat and turn the heating up. So we've got a Nest thermostat. If I'm feeling a bit cold, I can just sit there all sort of lazy and just say, turn the heating up, and it does.
Yeah, I mean, these are all...
For me, it's just because I'm lazy, but for somebody who actually has actual problems, that sort of allows them to be independent.
Oh, definitely. Another thing that with our setup at home, and it sounds futuristic, but it wasn't particularly expensive or fancy setup. It's just a couple of plugs that are about 20 quid each and a Google Home Mini for 30 quid, is that we've got some lamps on connected to the voice, so you can turn them on and off with your voice.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really like is Google Home, and I think Alexa has something similar, is the routines feature. So you
can do more things at once.
Yeah, but what I've set that up for is sort of leaving home and arriving home functions. So quite often when we get home, I've got a little girl who's only 2 years old, so I'll be trying to look after her. I might have some shopping bags in my hands, or whatever clobber we've been out with, her bag of all the bits and bobs you need when you've got a toddler. Yeah. All that stuff I'm loaded up with, and turning the lights on. Even with a light switch, you've got to put something down to flick the switch, and you've got to then turn the heating up and all those kind of things. But it's fantastic that I can just walk into my home and go, hey, buzzword, I'm home.
Yeah.
And all of those things. So again, although that's accessibility,
it's solving a problem for you, but also that sort of thing would be very, very useful for someone who's disabled.
Yeah, even though I'm able-bodied and have the ability to flick on a light switch and do those things, in that moment when I'm loaded up with things, I am temporarily unable. And those sorts of assistive technologies are so powerful at making it easier to interact with things.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like I should make it clear though, I'm not saying that
you feel disabled.
No, I'm not equating someone that's clearly got a life-changing disability to me with bags full of shopping, because that's not true. But all I'm trying to say is that by making technology more accessible for people,
it's helping everyone.
It benefits everyone. It's we're not just making it better for one person. It's we all, as we live our lives, can benefit from most adaptations for accessibility.
Yeah. I was watching a good video, and it was by a lady called Alicia, who is blind, and she was talking about how she uses her phone in a way that really helps her. So she's got this degenerative disease that affects her eyes, and so she's gradually getting worse and worse, apparently, and she has an iPhone. And one of the things that she does is she uses the camera mode, and so she's out and about, so she can still see a little bit, but maybe it's like blurry, maybe she can only see things that are quite close. But out and about, she finds it difficult to see, say, signs or things in the distance. But if you've got an iPhone with a camera and a zoom mode on the camera, hold that up to your eye so she can see. She can see the screen, which is only right next to her face, but the camera can see much further away. So it's kind of like having binoculars right there. You've got like a sort of dynamic.
That's really cool,
zoom.
Actually.
Yeah. So that's something that it's technology that we all have, but she's just using it in the way that really, really benefits her.
I think those sorts of things are quite interesting because I don't think the phone was ever designed with that in mind. Imagine what we could do if we actually tried to make it for that use case.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is that a lot of people who are registered blind aren't completely blind.
Yeah.
So, according to statistics by the Royal National Institute of Blind People, so there's 2 million people in the UK living with some level of sight loss, which is like 1 in every 30 people. But most of those are not completely blind. It'll be a spectrum. So there are people who are short-sighted but can still see things. Some people can only see light and dark. Some people can only see things that are very close. And some people might have like an eye flicker problem that means that they can't focus on things.
You did your really popular blog article where you pretended to be, you put a blindfold on and used a screen reader for a week, was it?
Yeah, so I blindfolded, tried to use my computer, just using a screen reader for a week. Very difficult. I think I was using Windows back then.
JAWS?
I think I was using JAWS, yeah. And just learning the keyboard layout is difficult enough, to be honest. I use a keyboard every day of my life, but it's completely different when you can't see where the keys are.
Hopefully by doing that, you learned ways in which we can build web pages better to be navigated.
Mostly what I learned is it's very difficult. And that people who are blind and use screen readers must have so much patience, because it's very tricky and it takes a lot longer to navigate things.
If you've actually ever heard anyone do it, though, they often turn the rate of speech up quite high.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
I've tried to listen to it and it's just unintelligible.
It's so fast.
A robotic voice speaking at speed.
It's because there's so much, if you think about it, there's so much information on any standard web page that you don't always look at, but it's there. If you're navigating it in a way that's just one bit after another bit after another bit, you're sometimes going to have to hear a lot more than you normally would. So why waste your time listening to it all? You want to sort of get through it as fast as possible. One of the biggest things that I learned actually is that Screen Reader is not just about the browser. It's not just about the web. It's about using the whole desktop. So from the moment that you turn the computer on, you've got to use a screen reader to even get to the browser, get to Chrome or Internet Explorer or whatever, get that open, and then navigate to a website, and then start using the website. So it's not just about the website, it's about using the whole operating system. And if you press the wrong thing, you could get out of the browser, because the browser is just one program that's running. You could accidentally get out of the browser and into the operating system and into an app that you never thought that was even running, and then you've got to then find your way back, which is really difficult if you don't know what you're doing and if you don't have the experience. Another one of the difficulties is that each website has a different way of doing things. And so even if you've learned a way to navigate one website, it might not necessarily be the same way that you would navigate another website.
Yes.
So that's quite difficult. And that's, again, why I think we need to work towards web standards. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does kind of mean that all websites are going to eventually be very boring and the same, but that's just better for everyone, surely.
Yeah, I think it's a great shame that it almost requires you to be a regular visitor to the website to learn the way to get to your content the fastest.
Yeah. Another thing I learned is that I always thought that you could tab through a web page. You know, if you're using a form and you fill out one field, then you press tab to get to the next one. I thought that that's how blind people use screen readers, but it's kind of not. The screen reader itself has its own kind of focus. So when you tab, you're selecting something, but when you're hearing something from a screen reader, you're not listening to what's currently selected by the browser. You're listening to.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, you know, your eyes can be looking at something different to what you have selected. It's essentially that the screen reader is reading you out part of the page. Last episode we talked about Jane Who.
Who?
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't get old, does it?
Oh, she's going to send us an angry tweet. So she had problems entering her name into a form, so because her last name is only 2 characters long. So she tweeted a screenshot of the form validation saying your surname needs to be at least 3 letters long. And she's like, well, this is ridiculous. So I was looking at other people who've had the same problem, and Pat O'Brien, he's screenshotted a form that says, please enter a valid last name. So O''Brian has an apostrophe in it.
Yeah.
It thinks that it's not a valid name. It thinks that you've entered something completely ridiculous, but it's just part of his name.
So he has to become Pat O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien, exactly. But it's another thing where the developers of that form just haven't thought about people. They haven't thought about every eventuality. And it's the sort of thing that just with a little bit more understanding and awareness of the world around them, though, that just wouldn't be a problem.
I also think, though, that a lot of the time these things are built by people who do care, but just maybe needed a bit more education. So I think, although we're right to flag it up, you know, we find humour in it, but you know, it's right that we try and make the world a better place. I still think that we should be.
Oh, don't send like hate mail to the developers of it. They probably didn't intend to offend anyone.
I don't think we should berate people. They may have been working to a tight deadline or in a limited framework, and so I think we should. Yeah, I think we should be
balanced.
Well, I just think we should just try and approach it in a positive way.
Yeah, it's something that needs fixing. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think we should berate them too hard. I think we should just try and be the positive change that we want to see in the world.
Yeah. In 2013, Apple released iOS 7, which have a heavy use of motion, parallax and zoom effects. And then after they released it, they realised that this was triggering vestibular disorder symptoms in users that have motion sensitivity, like an inner ear disorder that affects like balance and causes vertigo, things like that. So what they did is they introduced a reduced motion toggle, right, that someone can switch if they have this problem and if these motion effects were affecting them.
That's not inclusive design though, is it? That's definitely an afterthought for solving a problem.
If it's only like 1% of people who have this problem, they want to make it swishy and fancy and everything for everyone else.
True.
So they created this toggle in the accessibility settings. And then sometime after that, the Apple engineers proposed and implemented a media query for websites using that same setting, so that if you've got that setting set, the reduced motion toggle that turns all the animations off, that it will affect websites as well. And because they implemented it as a media query, that means that we as web developers can use that to change the behavior of our websites as well. So we can turn off animation on websites.
Is that still only on iOS, or do other platforms support that as well?
Right now, it works in the latest Safari on iOS and desktop and in Firefox, and it is coming in an upcoming version of Chrome.
Okay, I like that idea.
Yeah.
That's good.
What it means you can do is if you've got an animation that takes, say, half a second where something is moving, you could just say animation takes 0 seconds, so it just doesn't animate it at all. It just is static. Yeah, so I thought that's quite an interesting thing that web developers can use right now.
I do feel like that's another case what you said before, like the web out of the box is accessible, and it's sort of designers and builders that have created the accessibility problem. It's adding all this animation and whizziness again that's starting to cause these problems that we now need these workarounds for.
Yeah,
which needn't be a problem if we just stuck with the basic tools at our disposal.
True. I don't know. People like to make whizzy things though, don't they? Okay, we got a Facebook message from Anthony James who says, he really wants a thread for us to air examples of unusability that irks us. And then he's told me loads of things that irks him.
Okay.
This is what we've just become now, like a conduit for people to rant.
Well, we are the Unusable Podcast. If something's unusable, then we want to know about it.
Okay, so he says, tech companies' insistence that buttons don't work and that we must use glass touch screens. He's bought an iPod Classic for use at work to listen to podcasts, and he loves the click wheel interface.
Is it so old that it's got the physically scrolling wheel? Because the really early ones...
That's what he's talking about, the clicky wheel. Because he doesn't like the modern ones that have the screen. Because what he says he does is he puts it in his pocket.
No. But I mean, like literally the earliest iPods, that wheel moved
I see
under your finger, and then they changed it almost. I think on like was it the third generation? I think iPod had.
Well, he says it's the iPod Classic, so I don't know.
Is it got a colour screen? Have you got a picture of it?
No, he didn't. But he says he can use it in his pocket and feel that he's pressed the button to turn it on and off to sort of pause and play. Whereas the modern ones use a touch screen, and so you'd have to get it out and look at it, which is just more frustrating. He also doesn't like butter that doesn't spread. Not much we can do about that, is there?
I agree that butter that doesn't spread is a problem, but I think that spreadable butter is worse because they make it taste weird. Because spreadable butter, they make it spreadable by just mixing butter and oil.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't like that. I don't want oil.
Right, fine. He also says that his Mac Mini keeps freezing and he doesn't know how to solve it, whereas on Windows you can do Control-Alt-Delete and it shows you all where the resources are being used. But on Mac you have to go to the Mac Activity Monitor, but that's just saying everything's fine. I don't know. We're not IT support.
True.
Can't solve all the problems.
I've noticed that on a Mac though. They often try and in fact, Windows does this. So I've not used Windows for a long time.
Right.
But occasionally, because I am the computer guy for a lot of my friends and family, they will ask me to fix a problem. And
IT support for your family.
Yeah. The last time I used Windows was Windows XP.
Yeah.
And in order to debug a network problem, you could go into the settings and see what was going on with the network.
Yeah.
For someone technically experienced, you could get access to the information, right? You could see what IP address it had been assigned, whether it was... you could do lots of different things. Whereas nowadays on Windows, what's the latest version of Windows? I don't even know.
10?
10? Okay, if you go onto Windows 10 and you try and find the options for network, it will just say something like, there is no internet.
Oh, it's really dumbed it down.
Do you want to diagnose the problem? And you click diagnose the problem, and then you just get a spinner for 10 minutes, and then it goes, we weren't able to diagnose the problem. Click here for more help or something. And it's like, no, what I want to see is like what the problem is. I want to go, is the connection plugged in? Is it that you've not got an IP address from the router?
Yeah.
Is it something else? Is it DNS related? And trying to dig into those settings. I mean, maybe it's just the fact that I'm not very familiar with Windows 10, but it just felt very difficult to get to the fact abstract. It's like they tried to make it easy for people, but in the process they'd removed all the useful information.
I think you were looking for something that's a bit different to everyone else, though, possibly. You were looking for really advanced information.
True, but I feel like this is the difference between the Windows horrific blue screen of death, which is horrible and unusable, but at least it gives you some sort of message or code that you can try and look up to fix the problem.
Right.
Okay? Contrasting with the Mac version, which is just the whole screen goes black and you get a little icon of a sad face. So one of them's much more friendly than the other. One of them's very intimidating, one of them's very friendly. But on the flip side of that, one of them contains absolutely no information about what went wrong and how to fix it, and the other one at least gives you something, even if it is
jargon.
But at least it's something to go on, right?
Yeah,
if it says error code 3691E...
At least you can Google that, maybe.
Yeah, at least you can Google it and have some chance of knowing what's going on.
Yeah, fair enough. So Linux is the way forward, is it?
No, God, not for usability. I mean, I use Linux because I'm a power user, but I wouldn't
know where to start with Linux.
Having said that, my parents, who are complete technophobes, use Linux. I think because they don't have any preconceptions. They never really used Windows.
Okay.
Because they've got no preconceptions, and all they tend to do is turn it on and open a browser. If anything, it works great for them. They don't get viruses.
Oh, fair enough.
When scammers try and phone them up and say, there's a problem with your Windows computer, they go, well, you must be a scammer because we don't have Windows.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good for them. And there are some things actually that usability-wise that are a lot better in Linux. Adding a printer is one of them.
Oh man, adding a printer
in Windows
is so annoying. Printers are just annoying anyway.
That is an episode of a podcast.
That's an episode
entire
all about how annoying printers are. But nobody would listen to it, they'll just skip it. We've been sent something by Ali.
Okay.
So in our last episode, we talked about designing for failure. So she sent us a good example where on the B&Q website, when it's broken, so the error page, it contains a voucher code for £5 off your next order. So even if it's broken, they're giving you something. So that's quite good. Bad usability
nightmares.
Well, sort of nightmare.
Sort of nightmare, okay.
So mine is... so I went to the bank recently to pay a check-in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I stand there at the counter. There's a lady. So I give her the check. And she goes, okay, put your card into this device. It looks like a sort of chip and pin device that's on my side of the counter. So I do that. And then it has a very small screen on it. And on the screen, it asks for my PIN. And then a progress spinner starts spinning. And then she's doing something with the check. She finishes. She says, okay, all done. And meanwhile, I'm looking at this screen and the progress bar spinner, it's still going. It's still spinning. And I say, do I take my card out now? And she goes, oh yeah, take your card out. But there's this spinner going on. And now I know what a spinner is. That means something's happening. Just wait a bit. Don't do anything. Otherwise something might mess up. And so I'm worried about taking my card out, just pulling it out when there's a spinner going on. And she says, yeah, do it. So I take it out and I'm like, but that's not right. Something, I was worried that something might cancel. And she goes, oh, bless. As if as if I've misunderstood what was going on. Whereas I think I know what a spinner means.
Yeah.
It means don't do anything yet and just wait. Well,
Well, she's probably used to it because it happens all the time for her.
Yeah, but I don't know.
And that's just what it does.
Her reaction to me going, oh, bless, sort of makes me feel like I've done something stupid. Yeah.
That's so funny.
I don't know. That was just a weird thing that happened to me.
No, that is rubbish. That is totally rubbish.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of I had a thing in a bank the other day where I was trying to pay some cash in using an automated pay-in machine. It's like a cash machine in reverse.
Oh, I was with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I put my card in, and it says, "What do you want to do? Pay in cash or checks?" And I said cash, and then it says, "Okay, well, put your money in face up, all together." So I put in this wad of notes that I'd...
Oh, hi, Mr. Moneybags.
God.
Wad of notes.
And then
what happened?
It then set about counting it, and it went, please wait, and it took quite a while. It went, ka-chung, ka-chung,
yeah, because there was so much money in there, Mr. Moneybags. Yeah.
It was just a pile of fivers. And then after it had done all that, it then came on screen and said, we think you've deposited this many £20 notes, this many £10 notes, totaling this amount. Is that right? And I said yes. And then it had a spinner for a bit.
Right.
And it went, sorry, we couldn't process your transaction.
What?
Okay. So...
But did it say why?
No. It just said we couldn't process your transaction. I then look around at the queue and...
Oh, the queue
for the actual counter
quite...
for a human, and it was huge and not moving anywhere. And I was like, I really don't want to stand in that. So I thought, I'll try again. So I tried it again. I went through all this process of every step, and it did the same thing again. And then as a third attempt, I thought, well, maybe I'll just try some of the money. Maybe that'll work.
Yeah.
So I tried that. I don't know. In fact, there was one that was ripped in the pile of notes, a slight rip in it.
Okay, yeah.
So I thought maybe I'll take that one out. Let's see if that works.
Yeah, okay.
Failed again.
Oh.
Okay. So at this point, I'd tried 3 times, and I was sufficiently frustrated that I thought, I'll leave it. I don't need to pay this money in today.
Yeah.
I'll come back tomorrow. Maybe it's a temporary glitch. So I leave. The next day, I come back into the bank, and I'll try the same thing again, and it fails.
Right.
Okay, so then I think, well, I'll split the money up. Maybe I'll try half of it. Maybe there's a particular note that's causing the problem.
Yeah.
Get through the process again, does the same thing. So at this point, I'm exasperated. I think, look, if I need to pay this money in, I'm just going to have to stand in the queue. So I go and stand in the queue. Eventually get served by someone. It turns out that my card, my debit card, it's a bank account I use rarely, and they'd sent me a new card and I hadn't realised, and it was an old card.
Oh, but why didn't they say that? Why didn't they give that as the problem?
Exactly. So there's 2 things for me here. First of all, why didn't it say, at least we don't recognise your card, or anything like that?
Yeah.
Or, like, they could have put some message on screen that would...
An error message that would have said, this is an old card, would have been useful.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that wouldn't be right for security reasons. I don't know. Maybe they would be afraid of that. But it could have been more useful than, there's been a problem. Because I don't know whether it's with the money, with the card. I assumed it was the money that I was paying in that had the problem, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
The other thing that annoys me about this whole thing is that if there's a problem with that card, the first thing I did every time was put the card in the machine.
Oh, it could have told you there was a problem before you even put the money in.
Yeah, it could have literally read the card and gone, there's a problem, please speak to someone, right? But it let me go through all those steps. It said, what do you want to pay in? Cash or checks? Please insert all your money the right way up. Let's put all the money in. It went through the long process of counting it. It asked for confirmation about what I'd put in.
And then at the end
only
it goes...
at that point does it read the card and go, can't do anything with that.
Oh, man.
How ridiculous is that? It's for time wasting. Because I think that's also the reason that as a user, I associated the problem as being with the money, because it was after the money step that it had a problem. If it had had a problem at the start when I put my card in, I would think, oh, there's a problem with my card. I need to get that fixed. I wonder why. So, yeah, banks, rubbish.
Meanwhile, while you were doing all that, I remember this because I was with you. I noticed an accessibility problem, right? As I was stood waiting for you, there was a guy in an automated wheelchair trying to get into the bank, right? And the doors are double automatic doors, and one of them opened, but the other one didn't. And so he's trying to get through the door, and he just starts swearing loads.
Was he swearing?
He was just swearing loads, yeah. And I was just going to help him and open the other door, but he'd kind of managed to line himself up correctly so that he could get through the single door fine.
With millimetres to spare.
Yeah. But after he sort of came through, he was like, "Oh, sorry for swearing." And I just thought, well, I think that's fair enough. If you've enjoyed this, there's plenty more. The last episode we talked about designing for failure, and on YouTube we've got a video of us talking about the dark patterns when you try to cancel Now TV. Music is by Gold5472. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get a notification about the next one. And that's it. Until next time, bye.
Bye-bye.